All right, so Naveen, welcome to Bantaman episode 11. Two things to be talking about today, I suspect. So, I already have my diversion in mind. We should do an update on how we are doing with our vegetarian challenge because I believe we have both stuck to it. This is day 72. Do you want to tell everybody what you want to talk about today?
I want to talk about coffee.
I will give you the floor initially to maybe start talking about coffee. So,
Oh, yeah, sure. So let me start off about. I'll just talk briefly about where it all comes from. For us, from the time we were kids, we always had coffee at home. It was like the morning that you wake up, you drink a cup of coffee.
yeah,
When I say coffee, it's always filter coffee, South Indian filter coffee. Uh, and that kind of was, it was never anything special. It was always something that was there. And till, uh, till a few years ago, it was kind of part of the day's routine. And until I lived in Chennai, it was never a big deal because you could get good coffee powder anywhere that you went. Any
yeah,
shop would have it. And so it was not a big deal at all. And then we moved to Hyderabad, and then that's when we discovered that, oh, this is a very specific lifestyle thing that is not supported outside of Tamil Nadu, right?
right.
We had to go looking for specialty coffee shops that would actually sell us the coffee powder that we wanted. And it was also the time that I actually became very conscious about the whole thing, that it's not just, okay, this is what you do every day. It's got a lot, there's a lot of science behind it, all of that. Uh, so, and then that's when I got into like the intricacies of literally, knowing the proportions of what type of coffee we have, what is the
Yeah.
roast level, what is the grind level. I mean, back home, you would just go to a shop and say, oh, give me filter coffee, half a kilo, and then they would give it to you, and then they would just use it.
So, growing up, when you had coffee, was it always laced with chicory?
A little bit of not all, not like we get these hardcore like 43% chicory and all of that. Not that much.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
This is at home. It is always around 10 to 15%. That is more like what we used to have. Um, it was after coming here that I started having pure coffee without any chicory at all.
Right.
And then we experimented with different things, and we found out that a 5% kind of gives it a little bit of bite, but it's enough coffee to keep it. So it was
Yeah.
good. Um, so then that's, and now it's kind of, after that, it kind of, how these rabbit holes are. You start reading up, then you start learning, then you start talking to people, and then suddenly, there's all these different types of beans, how much you have to roast them, how much you have to grind them, and all of that. So now we have this whole, you buy half a kilo at a time, use up only 250 grams,
Yeah.
so that the grind is always fresh and all of that.
Right.
So this whole thing maybe took a few years. It didn't happen overnight. Um, and then of course now there is that almost obsessive thing. Wherever you go, you check out the coffee and you see how it is. And you try to figure out if you make it in any different way. There's also this almost ritual thing that, when we go back to anywhere in Tamil Nadu, the first thing you do after you get off the plane or the train is that you head off to like the nearest filter coffee place and you have a filter coffee.
Right.
So that's how it is. It's become like quite an obsession now, and we've been we've been lucky in that till now we've been able to maintain our coffee powder supplies. It's only now that we are kind of nearing the end of it, and I'm kind of hoping that the latest order that I placed will ship in the next and reach us in the next 15 days. I should be fine.
Right. Right. Okay. So we are getting a few audience questions, Naveen. So I'm going to go to those. So the first question is from Nilab, which is, what's your favorite coffee and what's your favorite coffee making method? Also, probably if it's something more exotic than just South Indian filter coffee, when did you discover it, and describe the rabbit hole you fell down?
So there are four answers to this whole thing, okay? Because
Ooh, okay.
because my favorite coffee on a regular basis is the South Indian filter coffee. There's no two ways about it. So that's one answer.
Right.
And then like my favorite filter, the thing for making filter coffee is my coffee filter at home.
Right.
Like the most basic piece of apparatus you can imagine. It's just a small filter with a stainless steel filter. It goes in. I mean, it's just like a very ordinary utensil.
Right.
There's nothing special about it, but the coffee that comes out of it is pretty great. So that is on a regular basis. Right? I discovered that I really like pour over, that too a cold pour over. This is probably I discovered about a couple of years ago.
Ooh.
That's like my favorite hipster coffee to drink when you go out.
Right.
And any of these, basically you ask them for their house blend when they do that. And usually you have like Indian coffee or something where they do that. It's very smooth. There's a little bit of a fruity flavor and all of that.
Yep.
So again, if I can discern a fruity flavor, it means that fruity flavor is pretty strong, right? So that way.
Right.
So that's all of that. Then I have my secret weapon, which is I also have this AeroPress coffee maker, which I deploy every now and then.
Okay.
That is, it's pretty cool. It actually works very well with any coffee powder which is ground for filter coffee, which means medium to dark roast and a medium to medium fine grind. That is your typical coffee filter grind. And that works very well in the AeroPress. And the AeroPress is all kinds of, it's like the ultimate hipster thing. It's like an upside down coffee filter. It's like a giant plastic syringe. And yeah, it's just like way complicated, way more complicated than it needs to be.
Right.
Then that's part of the whole hipster coffee thing. You just complicate it way beyond the need to.
Right. Okay, cool. All right. I think you've answered Naveen's question. Another one is from Kirti, which is, do you like Starbucks coffee?
I actually do like Starbucks coffee, especially when you go to any Starbucks anywhere in the world has their local coffee. Like the house blend is usually a local coffee, and it's got all of those things. It ticks the boxes. It's ethically sourced and all of those things.
Right.
And Starbucks does a surprisingly good job of representing it fairly.
Right.
It's not like, at least, as far as I know, it doesn't lose its character when it comes to Starbucks to you.
Yeah, I must admit I have mixed feelings about Starbucks. I think they roast it too much. Like every Starbucks blend just tastes like French roast to me, honestly. And particularly in India, they have a really bitter blend, actually.
I don't like their house blend in India, but I also know why, because I don't particularly like the flavors of the estates where they get it from. So I'm familiar with those, and those are things that I would avoid for myself. So in India, when I go to Starbucks, I don't get their house coffee. But they have some pretty interesting things as well. So.
Right. No, and predictably, I think anybody that's been in on the East Coast, well, on the northeast coast of the US, I should say, near the Canadian border, has a great love for Tim Hortons coffee in their head. So for me, Tim Hortons is I absolutely agree with Nila. Tim Hortons is the bee's knees of coffee. Starbucks, if I'm in a bind, there's no other coffee available, fine, I'll drink it. Let's switch gears a little bit. And there's another question from Kirti, which is, what's a day without coffee like for you? Like, I suppose that the corollary to that is how integrated is coffee into your daily routine? And do you feel any different if you don't drink a cup?
So that's actually a really good question. And surprisingly, I'm okay without coffee. It's not like, I can't function without my coffee.
Right.
The longest I've probably gone without coffee is this is when I'd gone for a bird photography trip to Gujarat. Let's say rural Gujarat is not the place to get, to want coffee. They made decent tea. So I made do with that, and I think I was there for about 7 days, and not a cup of coffee. Without coffee, I'm perfectly okay. It's for me, I think it's more of a taste, and that whole ritual thing than actually the caffeine or any dependence on it. I'm perfectly all right with it.
Okay, nice. I wish I could say the same. But I must admit, my day gets really dull. I start flagging. I'm a proper coffee addict, I think. So, if I don't drink coffee, chances are I'll get drowsy or I'll get really grumpy around 2 p.m.
So let me ask you, how much coffee do you drink in a day?
Too much. Yeah, so my day typically starts. I've got a mug right here because I just recently finished a cup of coffee. I typically drink about, I would say, 3 mugs in the morning, three of this size, and then through the day another 1 or 2. So we're talking about probably 70 to 80 ounces of coffee in a day.
That's a lot. I have a cup of coffee in the morning and that's it. That's my coffee for the day.
Right.
And there are some days when I might have a coffee during the day, but not all the days. So I probably drink about a fifth of what you drink, or maybe even lesser than that. Right? So that kind of also why I think I don't have that dependence on it, which actually comes in useful right now because even if we run out of coffee, I'm fine. I'm not going to lose anything.
Let's dive into the real hipsteriness, right, of the coffee obsession. So we talked a little bit about sort of the various ways that we make coffee, but let's also talk about how we source our coffee, because I think that's where I know your coffee habits, right? And so there's the usual, step out and find your coffee at the neighborhood supermarket kind of a bit, and you typically want to avoid adding chicory. Well, I want to typically avoid adding chicory. But I know of late, particularly in India, it has become a huge trend to source coffee, artisanal coffee actually, from as close as you can get in the supply chain to the plantation. And so do you want to talk about how you stumbled down that whole rabbit hole, and particularly about blends versus sort of single plantation, not quite single barrel, that's whiskey, but single plantation coffees and various types, maybe some of your favorites?
So we can see that. So there's just in India we have this thing called the Coffee Board of India. They pretty much they publish their whole classification of what are the different coffees and all.
Yeah.
So we basically have the two main things are the Arabica and the Robusta, the two types of beans.
Yep.
And pretty much that's about it. And then it's just different grades of that. And that is very fixed in India. It's been fixed for about 70 or 80 years since the board has been around. Like the different grades and the quality grades of coffee.
Yep.
But in recent times, it's been possible for us to actually buy coffee from outside that particular pipeline. And that is typically what these small boutique coffee brands are all about.
Right.
And then they have this the concept of shade-grown coffee, which I found really fascinating. I actually saw this being grown. And this was in Western Ghats. We'd been there.
Okay.
Another birdwatching trip. And we were staying in this old bungalow, like a colonial tea bungalow. Right? And within the plantations, when they first made the plantations, what they've done is, so typically, how tea plantations are, they would clear fell slope and then they would plant tea all over.
Yeah.
So what they did was they deliberately left swathes of forest untouched in between the tea plantations. The idea was that these would keep the rainfall there. It would break the wind. It would make sure all whatever natural processes were happening would happen, and would keep the tea productive enough. Now, what the shade-grown coffee does is it's actually grown in these forest areas, and it's natural. They just sow it and they just leave it. And they don't do any, once a coffee bushes start coming up, they don't do any operations on them. They don't even clear the floor. The floor, like if something falls from the trees, they just left there to rot.
Oh, right. Okay.
So what they do is they just mark where the coffee plants are, and whenever the berries are ripe for the picking, they just pick the berries. So which means nothing. They don't fertilize. They don't do any weeding. They don't do any insecticide. Nothing. All of that is done naturally because this is literally grown inside a natural forest.
Okay. Wow.
So any shade-grown coffee that you get is typically grown in places like this. So it's not like a coffee plantation where you're getting it from. So
Okay.
which also means that it's way more labor to get 1 kilo of coffee than it is from a coffee plantation. Which is also why you end up paying like 2 or 3 or 4 times the price that you pay for coffee that you get from your regular plants.
Right.
It comes from coffee plantations. And the coffee plantations are exactly like tea plantations. They're properly cultivated plantations with a lot of very intensive fertilization, intensive insecticides. It's all of that is there. So, which is also why then that it's kind of a lottery, right? Like, so the same lot from the same place that you get will have quite a variation in taste,
Right.
which is seasonal. Because from the time it's picked to the time it reaches you is also it also varies. So
Right. Right.
it's always a kind of toss up whether this is how it's going to be. So that what you lose here is consistency, but what you gain is pretty much everything else. Literally, your footprint is much less.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the advantage of it being pretty eco-friendly then, because it sounds like that land is pretty much earmarked for conservation wherever that coffee is collected rather than grown.
Yeah, and again, it's also a lot of these boutique brands. They work cooperatively with the farmers.
Right.
It's not like they don't do. They don't do like a procurement like the others would do, because a procurement then means that okay, you have an office and you have these different guys. They all bring their beans to you, and you just sort the beans accordingly, and you will roast it and you will sell it to your customers.
Right.
They literally leave the roasting and the grinding to the farmers themselves, which means that it's more. It's about as single source coffee as you can get.
Right.
So it's pretty interesting. That way, overall, it seems to be a much more responsible thing to do to go after these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, from my perspective, as you know, I've pretty much been sourcing my coffee lately from these boutique sellers. Typically, they are affiliated to either a chain or a singular coffee shop where they've got commercial relationships with various plantations around the country, typically in South India.
Right.
So I've been sourcing most of my coffee, I'd say, from Flying Squirrel and from Blue Tokai. So we'll and it's probably not as eco-friendly and responsible as what you're describing, but it is, yes, you're right, it's more consistent in terms of flavor and so on. But yeah, it's been really heartening for me that of late there's been a little bit of an artisanal coffee explosion in India, really. And it is in India, typically it's chai country, so it's heartening to me to see kind of coffee come into its own, at least in a hipster way.
At least in a hipster way, yeah. Small beginnings, but I think that kind of coffee is here to stay, because see, at the end of the day, if it is going to sustain a lifestyle that's sustainable for the people on the ground who are growing it, like the farmers, then I think it's good for us to get behind that. And it's kind of a virtuous cycle there. When we get our hipster kicks, and we get to preserve their livelihood, they get to preserve their livelihood as well. So.
Very true. Yeah.
So this kind of went very serious in a very serious direction. So I want to steer away from that, and I want to talk about the time I caught my beard and hair on fire because I tried to be really hipstery about some coffee.
Oh, okay. Do tell.
We can go down that, but maybe do you want to do your diversion before we do that?
Okay, so let's switch into the diversion. I'll remind everybody of a prior episode that we had where we were talking about vegetarianism, and I think from your perspective, it was more about environmental vegetarianism because you felt that the more eco-friendly, more climate responsible way to live is vegetarian. For me, it was probably less of that and more about the ethics of it and sort of the animal cruelty involved, particularly when it comes to factory farming and so on, and it made me really uncomfortable. So for those who haven't caught that episode, I would highly recommend you go and listen to it. It's in our podcast feed. The episode is called Vegetarianism. But anyway, at the end of that, 72 days ago, we decided to go on a 30-day vegetarian challenge. The first day of that was February the 29th, this being a leap year. Here we are on May the 9th, and we both stayed vegetarian. I mean, we've both probably eaten eggs, but I think we have stuck to the no meat, no chicken, no fish kind of a rule. So, yeah, let's start with how's it been for you, and what changes, if any, have you noticed in your day-to-day?
So, okay, we need to address the obvious. I think that the whole lockdown because of the coronavirus is kind of decided a lot of things for us, and it's also kind of put less in the way of temptation on the table for us because that was meat was kind of off the menu because most of my meat consumption is outside the house, and since we did not leave it, so that kind of worked in my favor. But strangely, I have not noticed anything different. I don't think there are any health benefits to this, or at least I can't feel any of that. But on the other side, I don't feel any overwhelming urge to, I need to go eat meat. The meat cravings are not there. And I don't know, I was kind of, I know we had conversations about haleems and biryanis throughout, but I think that also, just because we've been physically kept away as well, kind of contributed in a big way to this. So what I'm really curious now is to see if this resolve is going to survive the opening up after the lockdown. Like when we are out and about and we have access to it, very easy access to it, and then how we meet that. That is what I'm curious about right now. How has it been for you? I mean, have you had any urges or how did that go?
I wouldn't say no. I haven't had urges per se, but from my perspective, first of all, I think I have fewer constraints than you do because I think habitually you generally don't cook meat at home.
Yes, absolutely.
Whereas we do, and so that's one part of it. The other part of it is with the lockdown. The packets of breakfast sausage and whatnot that are in my deep freeze become that much more of a factor. They loom over me, particularly when on a particular day when you're out of breakfast cereal, the new grocery order is yet to arrive. The temptation is there to just quickly prepare 3 or 4 links of sausages, eat that with a loaf, slice of bread or something. So apart from that, it's definitely given both me and Kirti, my wife, a little bit of a quandary, which is there's an easy meal option sitting there, but she's not willing to eat it. So that's been a problem. But no, you're right. I don't feel any urge. The only pang I would say that I felt in 72 days has been sometimes there are some foodstuffs that you eat which you are just habituated to eating with meat. So like the other day, we'd made a really kick-ass spaghetti aglio olio, right? It was fantastic, but I just found myself missing those chunks of meat as I ate it. So, but apart from that, absolutely no lifestyle change, and if anything, the discovery has been quite impressive actually, because I've tried foodstuffs that I wouldn't have before, or I've just been forced to eat certain things and then found out I like them. Where, I mean, we haven't been to any restaurants or anything in the last 2 months, coincidentally. But yeah, I definitely have experimented a little bit more with veggies, and that's been a delight.
Okay. So I really don't know. I mean, I know we've been talking about the biryani bracket also. So there's a bunch of things that are kind of outside, which are outside our control right now.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how all of those things, how our result fares in the face of all of them.
Indeed. No, and yeah, for those listening, the idea behind the biryani bracket is we live in Hyderabad, which is pretty much the world's capital of biryanis. There are any number of fantastic outlets that have their own spin on a really good mutton biryani. So Naveen and my idea is, we're going to see this lockdown go its natural way. But on the other side of this, we are going to, we have made a list of the top 16 biryanis in Hyderabad, gone to some pretty authoritative sources to make that list, and which means we asked on a few WhatsApp channels. Don't tell anyone. But what we are going to do is pretty much March Madness style, right? Whenever this lockdown is over, we are going to go out and do pairs of biryani every day, and then narrow it down so that we crown the Banterman Biryani of the year for Hyderabad. So, that's a future episode. We'll let you know when that comes up. But no, it sounds like we're on track to hit 100 days of vegetarianism then, Naveen.
Yeah, I think we have both our Prime Minister and our Chief Minister to thank for that.
Yeah, not to mention a experiment gone wrong in a Wuhan lab. But let's not stoke any conspiracy theories. All right, so that's been our vegetarianism update.
Anywhere you go in Tamil Nadu, you'll find shops selling authentic Kumbakonam degree coffee. Ask any two different people what Kumbakonam degree coffee is, and the two of them will give you different answers. There are as many different definitions for what Kumbakonam degree coffee is as there are coffee drinkers in Tamil Nadu. So clearly, everybody has his own take on what it is, and I have no take on it. I've listened to about 1,000 of these takes, and I've come to the conclusion that it's like you just make your own Kumbakonam degree coffee, right?
Okay.
But this was when we were in a small town outside near Kumbakonam itself, right? And I ran into this chef, Chef Muthu. He runs a couple of restaurants in Chennai, and we got talking about coffee, and Chef Muthu is like, "I'll tell you how to make the most authentic Kumbakonam degree coffee."
Okay.
Then he comes out with this list of Ayurveda-like things, It must be milk from the same cow which is milked early in the morning on the banks of the Kaveri River. Water only from the all of shit like this, okay. And I'm like, okay, fine. And then he's like, okay. Then the most important thing is when you're making the decoction, when you're going to put the decoction into the coffee filter, you have to caramelize a little bit of sugar on the bottom of the filter and then put the coffee powder on top of it.
Okay.
It's like, what you do is you take half a spoonful of sugar on the bottom of your filter and leave it on your stove till it caramelizes. And then while it's still hot, then you put the coffee powder on top of it.
Right.
And I'm like, this little bit sticks in my head, apart from all the strange things that he said. I was like, okay, I'm going to try this when I get home. I'm going to caramelize a little bit of sugar when I make my filter coffee. Right? But here's my thing. I've never caramelized sugar in my life. Who caramelizes sugar in your life? I mean, why would you caramelize sugar in your life?
Right.
So I've got the filter coffee, the filter, and holding it with the tongs on one side. And then I put in half a spoon of sugar. and then I'm like gingerly keeping it atop the flame on the stove.
Right.
Now, a coffee filter has tiny holes in the bottom,
Yeah.
right? So the sugar caramelizes. And
It melts.
I did not know before that day that melted sugar is highly flammable. Right? So the flame goes through those little holes and the sugar catches fire.
Nice.
And I'm like, what? Why is the sugar on fire? So I've moved the filter away from the stove, but it's still burning, right?
Right.
Now, what do you do when you see a flame? You try to blow it out, right? So I did the same thing. And at this time, when this happened, I had like a nice full beard and a lot of facial hair. Let's put that.
Right.
So without thinking, right, I just like blow into it. Now, the stream of air from my mouth through the flame obviously has enough oxygen in it. So the flame just rushes up through that and just like singes my beard, a little bit of my hair, and all of that.
Oh dear.
I'm like, ugh. I like put that out, and then I finally figure out a way to douse the fire in the filter. It was pretty crazy. Needless to say, I did not try caramelizing sugar with a filter coffee after that. But
Yes.
yeah, that was how me trying to be authentic. Anyway, there wasn't any point to it, I realized later, because this is just one out of 100 other stipulations for how a Kumbakonam degree coffee had to be made.
So why is it called Kumbakonam degreed coffee?
That's a rabbit hole again. So you asked, there's again 100 different stories for this. The most common story is that in the time of the British Raj, there used to be a man called a milk inspector, whose little job was to go around town with a lactometer and dropping it into milk wherever anyone was using it, and to make sure, so if it was only above a particular degree, that the people were allowed to call it milk. Because you would otherwise water it down too much.
Oh.
So this is like a guy from the Department of Weights and Measures would go around with a lactometer. So this was essentially a degree. So because of the degree in the degree.
Right.
So this is one story, right? The most fantastic story I've heard about this is when you mix the Kumbakonam degree coffee, you pour it from glass to glass like that. You don't pour it straight. You pour it at a degree like that. It's absurd, but
that sounds apocryphal. Yeah, that sounds like somebody just made it up. That you've got angles.
I'm sure all of these guys made it up. It's just that I was like, okay. I'm like, this takes the cake literally. And the person who said this was absolutely serious about it. I wasn't even like, okay. Yeah, I'm like, so I think there's enough different methods and different everything ascribed to Kumbakonam degree coffee. It's a mythical creature. There is no specific thing. So we went to this shop in Kumbakonam, right? The town itself. This old shop. It sells only one thing. It only sells Kumbakonam degree coffee. And it's like more than 100 years old. Like tiny. It's like dingy. It's like those benches have been there for 100 years. You go sit there. They got the picture of the founder up on the wall. It's that kind of a shop, right? And they only sell this thing. They don't sell anything else. It was without doubt one of the most unimpressive coffees I've had in my entire life.
Oh no! Oh, yeah. I hate it. I must say I hate it when local legends turn out to be bunkum like that. Yeah. It's unfortunate.
It's crazy. It's just insane. So right now, if you go to Kumbakonam, there are like a few shops that are the so-called authentic purveyors of authentic coffee. And you can actually have a really good Kumbakonam degree coffee from them. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say what it is. It definitely tastes quite unique, what they give you.
Right.
So there's a whole bunch of claims that they have to it. Like, for example, the milk in it cannot be reboiled.
Ooh, okay.
It means they have fresh milk. And when they make coffee for you, they take like that much out and they boil it and then they make it. So you can't have boiled and cooled and reboiled milk.
Got it.
So that's one of the things that they do. And the second is obviously the water is used is water from the Kaveri River.
Right.
So stuff like this, right? I mean, it's kind of, so this whole thing in one of the other groups that I'm on, there was this whole thing that came up on why Kumbakonam degree coffee does not have a GI tag, is because nobody knows what the hell a Kumbakonam degree coffee is. So it doesn't look like we'll get a GI tag for it. Yeah, but it's kind of crazy how everybody has their own theory of what a Kumbakonam degree coffee is.
Brilliant. All right, so let's do an exercise, Naveen. What's your we can each take turns. But what's your best cup of coffee? How would you go about making a really good cup of coffee, and how do you take it?
So again, two ways, right? The one is my regular South Indian filter coffee,
Okay.
which basically is like take 3 tablespoons of filter coffee, of coffee powder in a coffee filter, and then you like pack it nice and tight, and then you pour roughly about twice the quantity of water on top of it.
Right.
Typically water that is hot but not boiling. So then you do that and you let it sit for a while. It takes quite a while for this to percolate down. It takes about 4 or 5 hours for this to get done.
Right.
Typically we do that in the night so that in the morning you have like a fresh bunch of coffee. And you then you have this with milk, a little bit like maybe like half and half, or maybe 1/3, 2/3. So the 2/3 being milk. So that's like my everyday coffee.
Right.
But again, like I said, a black coffee, the same thing. Instead of the milk, you put hot water in it, it becomes black coffee. And so anytime apart from the morning, if I'm having coffee, I prefer it black without milk.
Nice.
So that's essentially my coffee.
Okay.
What about yours? What's your favorite coffee?
Well, I mean, sort of like you, right? The one thing I cannot abide these days, I've actually developed a physical reaction to it. Instant coffee just makes me acidic and gives me a headache these days. So I cannot drink instant coffee. But my generally the morning routine that I follow is, I'm blessed because it is my favorite way to make coffee. I use a regular coffee filter. There's a percolation pot that I have at home. I'll use my artisanal sourced coffee, and I usually go for medium blends, medium roasts. And it'll just be sort of in a mug of coffee, I'll maybe add a teaspoon or a tablespoon of milk.
Right.
Sort of just a blush of milk, really. And that's my favorite way to drink it. The thing that probably turns a lot of people off about my coffee habit is, over time, I've developed this thing where I let the coffee just sit. So if I take a really nice big mug of coffee, I don't care if it's not piping hot. Right? I'll drink it over a good 30, 40 minutes. And by the time it finishes, it's kind of cold. But yeah, that's for me, that's the favorite way to drink coffee.
Oh, absolutely. I'm exactly like that. I would drink an absolutely cold cup of coffee just because it's been sitting on my table for a long time. I'm absolutely okay with that.
All right. So I am conscious of the time. I think we need to wrap up, but we would be remiss if we wrapped up a discussion of coffee in 2020 without uttering the D word. And I'm speaking, of course. I'm speaking, of course, of Dalgona coffee, and I know we'll put a link to it again in the description when we upload the pod and the video. But you experimented with Dalgona, and to be honest, until you sent me your Dalgona coffee making video, I had no idea it was a thing. So you're clearly more with the times than me. So do you want to just describe to people how your Dalgona adventure went?
So it's very, very simple. For me, Dalgona, the taste, how it turned out was a very comforting childhood cold coffee taste. Like when, I don't know if you remember this, Nescafe had this whole advertising push. Sometime in the 90s, where they tried to, because in India, you always drank hot coffee.
Yep.
We did not know what cold coffee was.
Yep.
So they actually ran these television ads where there was a blue shaker, like a plastic shaker, in which they would put coffee and instant coffee, milk, sugar, and ice cubes, and then somebody would shake it, and then they would show it being poured into a glass and people drinking it. And that was, and when that thing happened in all our households, we ultimately acquired that blue shaker from Nescafe. It was like if you bought 4 packets of Nescafe or something, you would get that for free. And then in summers, we used to have this at home.
Yeah, I was luckier. Nestle came to our school and distributed samples of the shaker, so I had a shaker without having to buy too much coffee.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry.
So that's how. So that's exactly that's precisely the moment when cold coffee got on as a drink in India, right?
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, that is like a very integral part of our childhood. The taste of cold coffee was, and you would not have this on regular days. This is in the summer holidays when your parents had time to do this for you. It was a treat that you would get maybe once in a week.
Yeah.
So those memories are really special, right? And for me, the Dalgona coffee, when we had it, like, so you made it, put sit on top of milk, but then when you mixed with cold milk and you had it, it was a really, taste of childhood.
So if I hadn't developed this visceral physical reaction to instant coffee, I would have, I would have attempted Dalgona probably, but oh well.
Well, it's like if you have an ice latte, for example.
Yeah.
That's like a Dalgona coffee, except that it's excessively sweet because in order to make it froth that much, you need to put that much sugar in it. So.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's quite okay. I mean, to have once in a while, it's like nice.
Nice. Okay. All right. So I think we're just about past the 40-minute mark. We'll obviously do a few edits on the video and on the audio when we put it up. But it's been fantastic. So any final thoughts? Anything else you wanted to talk about on the topic of coffee before we wrap up for the day?
Yes. I can't wait to go out and have a cold pour over.
In a cafe where you're served and you don't have to.
Yeah, where somebody else does the pouring over, not you.
I hear you. All right. Okay.
Yeah. So maybe we should do a coffee bracket, just like we are doing the biryani bracket as well.
Ooh, you know what? We should.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we could do a whole series of brackets because we also talked about this. We talked about doing a Halim bracket, which won't be possible this year because no Halim is being cooked in Hyderabad.
Yep.
Google it, folks. If you don't know what Halim is, you're missing a treat. But yeah, maybe we should. Maybe we should do a coffee bracket, a gin bracket, a biryani bracket, a Halim bracket.
Yes.
It just writes itself. But yeah, all right. So let's also close this by saying this has been our first experiment at going live on YouTube with a episode of the pod. Did this completely impromptu, to be honest. So thank you to the few people that tuned in to watch this. Probably we can make a promise that when we record the next episode, to give everyone a preview, it will be about a gin habit that I have developed over the years, and that I think Naveen, you caught it from me. I like to think. So we'll talk about our gin habit. We will be doing it live on YouTube, and so we'll give everyone plenty of advance notice that we will be going live with it, and so we'll speak to everyone then. And of course, that will be around day 79, 80. Because it'll be next weekend, essentially, of our vegetarian challenge. But I think, Naveen, you'll probably have to come up with a different diversion for that episode.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And one more thing I will do is I feel like because we did this at short notice and we are experimenting with the medium, we didn't really prepare props for this video broadcast.
Yes.
I will come prepared with some really, really classy bottles of gin, because a gin bottle is in and of itself an art form. So,
I have a few to show off too. So
excellent. All right. So that's something for everyone to look forward to. We have been the Banterman, and thank you everyone for watching us, for listening. This will be the debut video eventually for our YouTube channel. So If you're in there, do like and subscribe and leave us a comment. What did you think of this video? This was unscripted, so I feel like there's maybe a lot more ground to cover on the topic of coffee or on our vegetarian challenge. So leave us your thoughts, your questions in the comments below, and share this widely. Like I said, we promise we will be going live with plenty of notice for the next episode, which will be all about gin. So thanks again, Naveen, and that's it for us for today.
Cheers.
Adios.